My name is Jassim Marzougi, Senior Director here at ADGM Academy, and we are talking about today's session, Fireside Chat, which is Cultivating World-Class Talent with Ray Dalio, founder and CIO, mentor at Bridgewater Associates. Ray, it's great to have you. Welcome back to Abu Dhabi.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump into the discussion. Ray, your journey from building one of the most successful investment firms to writing about principles of life and work has inspired many leaders. Today, as we discuss the topic of cultivating world-class talent, I want us to explore not just the strategies behind attracting and retaining talent, but also the ecosystems that allow individuals to thrive and drive innovation. So, Ray, in the beginning, if you can maybe share with the audience a bit about your experience and what are some of the key priorities that you had within your organization when it comes to attracting, retaining, and having a thriving ecosystem.
Thank you for your question. Thank you. It's great to be here. You know, I was lucky that I started my business 2 years out of school. And so I think that leadership is very much an extension of one's values. Sometimes you go into an organization, but every organization has to have culture, which is an extension of their values. And for me, it was very simply, in one sentence, I wanted meaningful work and meaningful relationships through radical truthfulness and radical transparency. So that was my culture. I'm not saying that's the culture that everyone should have, but I think every organization needs to have a very clearly defined culture of how people are going to be with each other. For me, the meaningful work and meaningful relationships means, are you on a mission together? For example, ADGM Academy is on a mission to educate and to change human capital, okay, that everybody's behind. And then the meaningful relationships is how you are with each other in order to build that. Is it a superficial relationship, or do you share each other's lives and well-being? I think that there's a great power in that. And so when I say meaningful work and meaningful relationships, I also believe through radical truthfulness and radical transparency is very important to me. When I mean radical truthfulness, I think sometimes, often, it's difficult to talk about the difficult things, particularly mistakes and failures. But we listen to the discussion of sports, and I think that's such a good example. So to know that you have trust, not just superficial, you know, come in, everybody gets a high five, and then they talk behind each other's backs in a critical way. So for me, it was very essential. I had a principle: speak up, own it, or get out. In other words, bring it up to the surface, anything. You can't speak behind other people's backs. So that radical truthfulness, to know what people truly think, and then to deal with those thoughts, it was very important for me. And transparency, so people could see things firsthand so that they know that there's not, they know what the real story is. So that was a culture that was very important to me. I would say a few other elements relate that, and was talked about earlier in the first session, is mistakes, the value of mistakes. Like, we all make mistakes, and we all have strengths and weaknesses. And to be able to deal with those in a forthright way to make a good team, these are important elements. So I felt that I had an extended family of sorts, or a team that was working together. That was my culture. But whatever it is, I think it's so important to be crystal clear about what that culture is. So what I did was I would always write down, this would help me a lot. I would think, whenever I would make decisions, what were the reasons I made those decisions, and I would write them down. I would call them principles. Those are my principles for making decisions. And having those principles clearly communicated, and then people could see them in action. I think these things are important.
Definitely. So last week when we were having a discussion about today's session, one of the questions was that, what does radical transparency look like? So we actually have a video to show the audience about what does radical transparency look like within the organization. So if we can play the video and give the audience an idea.
A week after the U.S. election, our research team held a meeting to discuss what a Trump presidency would mean for the U.S. economy. Naturally, people had different opinions on the matter and how we were approaching the discussion. The dot collector collects these views. It has a list of a few dozen attributes, and so whenever someone thinks something about another person's thinking, it's easy for them to convey that assessment. They simply note the attribute and provide a rating from 1 to 10. For example, as the meeting began, a researcher named Jen rated me a 3, in other words, badly, for not showing a good balance of assertiveness and open-mindedness. As the meeting transpired, Jen's assessment of people added up like this. Others in the room had very different opinions. That's normal. Different people are always going to have different opinions. And who knows who's right? Let's just look at what people thought about how I was doing. Some people thought I did well, others poorly. With each of these views, we can explore the thinking behind the numbers. Here's what Jen and Larry said. Note that everyone gets to express their thinking, including their critical thinking, regardless of their position in the company. Jen, who's 24 years old and fresh out of college, can tell me, the CEO of the company, that I'm approaching things terribly. This tool helps people both express their opinions and separate themselves from their opinions to see things from a higher level. When Jen and others shift their attentions from inputting their opinions to looking down on the whole screen, their perspective changes. They see their own opinions as just one of many, and naturally start to ask themselves, how do I know my opinion is right? That shift in perspective of going above it and seeing the full range of views shifts the conversation from arguing over individual opinions to figuring out objective criteria for determining which opinions are best. Behind the dot collector is a computer that is watching what all these people are thinking, correlates it with how they think, and communicates back to each of them based on that. Then it draws the data from the meetings to create a pointillist painting of what people are like and how they think. And it does all that guided by algorithms. Knowing what people are like helps to match them up better with their jobs. For example, a creative thinker who is unreliable might be matched up with someone who is reliable but not creative. Knowing what people are like also allows us to decide what responsibilities to give them and to weigh our decisions based on people's merits. We call it their believability. Here's an example of a vote that we took where the majority of people felt one way, but when we weighed people's views on the basis of their merits, the answer was completely different. This process allows us to make decisions not based on democracy and not based on autocracy, but based on algorithms that take people's believability into consideration.
You know, we really do that stuff.
Jen wasn't very happy with you that day.
Sorry?
Jen wasn't very happy with you that day in the meeting.
It's great. Shouldn't people bring to the surface what they really think? Or should they keep it under the surface? And even in a meeting. So a few things I want to highlight about that. First, it always struck me that in a meeting, the only the things you know about what people are thinking are the people who are talking. So I don't know right now what you all are thinking, but if you had this device, I would know what all of you are thinking. So it's so great to be able to use a tool like that. Also, the tools that you have embedded in your organization are going to affect the behaviors. By having that tool, I can reinforce an idea meritocracy so that the best ideas win out. And we can see what everybody's thinking. You also see in that people think differently. I've created a personality profile test for people to see the different ways of people thinking. We all think differently. By understanding how we think differently, that's terrific in building a team. And then also, you know, that disagreement. How do you deal with disagreement? Do you have just an autocracy, the one person who is going to say that this is the way it is? Or do you have the democracy, like everybody's opinions are equally good? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, though that was what I would, my approach. I'm not saying that's the approach for everybody, but I do think everybody needs to have a culture, and you need to know what the culture is. And I think then you also have to have tools that reinforce that. And I think we're now in an era with data and AI and other tools that allow you to know what people like and now allow themselves to know what they're like, to be objective, to know what one's strengths and one's weaknesses are is a great attribute because you can work with others who are strong where you're weak. So I think that that's the direction of the future. These have the culture, have the tools.
Definitely. I want to touch a bit more about the tools in addition to AI that was mentioned. We see today organizations are more and more adopting artificial intelligence within the organization, and the employees and staff within the organization also utilizing AI. What's your opinion when it comes to the use of AI and how we can cultivate skills to make sure that they're future-proof with the advent of AI?
I think the biggest issue is, can you have everybody agree, or most people agree, that we will find objective ways that we will mutually agree on to understand your strengths and weaknesses, like on a team, right? And because that isn't easy. But once people realize that that's a real advantage and that they can understand their mistakes and understand what they're like and how they can evolve through that, I think that that's the most important thing. Then the capacity to have tools like the one I just showed, so to be able to objectively get at that. It produces a 360-degree review every meeting and every time. And so what would happen would be that people would go to that and at the end of the day look at it and say, is that objective, is that good feedback? And then you didn't have to wait till an annual review in which everybody's trying to measure things. So I think that the question is really a question of what you will be able to embrace.
Definitely. And when it comes to culture, so you mentioned, that culture is very important when it comes to driving the organization and all of the team members aligning on, what needs to be done. When it comes to the culture element of it, how much of it is the, hiring individuals who already fit the culture of the organization versus those who join that may have a different opinion but then align with that culture within the organization, and which are important as well?
I think it's like organizing any organization. You have to convey, is this the right kind of organization? What's the culture? So I think of it's been called an intellectual Navy SEALs. This is my kind of culture, okay? So, okay, it's going to be this way. So then show videos of what it's like, explain it, and so on. And people then will intellectually say, okay, is that for me or not for me? Be clear on what that culture is. And then they have to experience it. So I think it's like the Navy SEALs or something, okay, now I'm going to have to get into the cold water and I'm experiencing it. And you prepare them for that and you help them through that. But I think you have to be clear. You have to be clear on what your culture is, and have to be clear on what they're going to get into, and ask them, is that for them? And then there's a trial and error period. And everybody knows, that through that trial and error period, you need guidance and ways of adapting to make it work well.
Definitely. When it came to Bridgewater and the growth of Bridgewater, were there any changes and tweaks that were done throughout the life cycle of the organization? Any tweaks that you had done?
Yes.
And experiences?
Certainly. I went from a two-bedroom apartment being my office, and so not many people, just three of us. And then when I found out, when we got to 68 people, I knew it was 68 because every holiday season I would pick an individual gift for people, and then I would write a lengthy note, and I couldn't do it when it was 68. It then dawned on me that, okay, now I went from 68 people to 1,500 people. And so how do you know each other in the same way? That was important. So at that point, I had to do a number of things differently. I had to recognize that the units are about 100 people that you can have an intimate, good relationship with, and think about how those units then work together to have a culture together. And then I had to make myself so much more clearer that what I had to do was, that's why I wrote down all these principles. There's a book that when I turned over the CEO job, I put it together as a compendium of life and work principles. That's the compendium of principles that I wrote down because I had to keep communicating well. And then I found that by videoing things and being very open, that everybody could see things happening, including people make mistakes and making it acceptable. So those were the transitions to make, just a smaller group into a bigger company that was able to work well together.
Excellent. So I want to end by asking you, Ray, you've had a lot of success during your life due to your hard work, perseverance. What would be a piece of advice that you would give individuals and leaders when it comes to maintaining and maximizing the potential of their organization and their workforce?
Well, I think, three things. Make your work and your passion the same thing. And don't forget about the money part. You have to taste some money. Don't obsess about the money part either. Don't mistake the money for success. Think about what you want more. You have to have enough money to take care of your family and to do those things well. But if your work and your passion are the same things, and you're doing it with people who you really care about and care about you, I think that that's the greatest reward, and it's also going to set you up for the greatest success, because if your passion and your work are the same things, you're going to get into it, you're probably going to be better at it. So, and I think that that's what makes for a great life. Mm-hmm. Don't optimize over the traditional stereotypes of what success is, like making a lot of money, having a lot of status, and so on. That's all superficial. Mm-hmm. It's really, again, this meaningful work that you feel is meaningful, and the relationships, and enjoying the benefits of the learnings from mistakes. Just as it was said earlier, when you have a mistake, I have a principle: pain plus reflection equals progress. Because pain is a messenger. It tells you about how the world works. Okay, it's producing that pain. And then the reflection: what can I do differently to make it go better? It's like that process. So those would be the recommendations I'd make.
Excellent. Thank you for your time, Ray. And it was a pleasure discussing this, this very important topic of cultivating world-class talent. During this session, we discussed the need to have well-defined culture, implementable through various tools and techniques, while leveraging AI to make data-driven decisions, to empower teams and individuals, while also motivating people through a shared mission built on meaningful work and meaningful relationships. I'd like to thank the attendees and for everyone who is here with us today. Together, we can work towards building a future-ready workforce that is equipped with the right skills to meet the ever-evolving demands of the market. Thank you very much, everyone.